Thank you very much. This is a bit different to usual, isn't it? I usually see a screen in front of me. I'm seeing lovely faces. So I like this. This is fantastic. So welcome very much to LookUpStrata's first live event. We acknowledge and pay respects to the traditional Aboriginal people of these lands and waters, as well as their descendants, and we also acknowledge the many Aboriginal people from other regions, as well as Torres Strait and South Sea Islander people who now live in the local area. We're so glad everyone could be here to join us today for what promises to be a groundbreaking and empowering event for lot owners and committee members. You'll learn how to navigate the complex world of body corporate management, protect your rights, and help create thriving communities built on transparency and ethical practices. Since 2013, LookUpStrata has been providing reliable strata information to lot owners, strata managers, and other strata professionals, and we've grown into a nationally recognised source of interesting and reliable strata information. Today's live event, Demanding Ethics, An Owner's Path to a Better Body Corporate, is an extension of our commitment to providing you with the knowledge and tools necessary to navigate the strata landscape successfully. It's my pleasure today to introduce our MC for the day, Dr. Nicole Johnston, founder and director of Strata Knowledge, an independent research and consulting firm specialising in strata and community title law and governance. As a socio-legal researcher, Nicole's focused on translating applied research into practice by collaborating with industry to ensure impactful and beneficial outcomes. Now, Nicole is deeply involved in the strata community and she brings a wealth of experience to guide us through today's program. Strata Knowledge does hold an annual event called the Strata Impact Conference on the Gold Coast, and hopefully Nicole can share some of those details with us as the morning progresses. Before we begin, let's take a moment to acknowledge our event partners and sponsors whose support has made this event possible today. We hope you've had a chance to speak with some of them already. We do have an extended break coming up at morning tea time, and during the break, we encourage you to continue conversations with our speakers, with other owners that are in the room today attending, and also our strata specialists that are around the room. And everyone here will be able to provide a different perspective and insight on fostering healthy strata communities. We thank you for taking the time to attend today and paying the small registration fee, and all profits from today's event will be donated to charity. And let's get started and make the most of this really great opportunity to learn, connect and work together so we can improve the future of our strata communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nikki, and thank you for the invitation to MC this fantastic event today. It is really rare that owners in community title schemes get a chance to come together, learn valuable insights from knowledgeable professionals, and discuss these really important issues. I hope that this event is the first of many, and I'm glad to see so many organisations supporting today. To our audience, it was so exciting to see when this event sold out. It reinforces my view that there are many lot owners wanting to engage, learn, and make meaningful contributions to their body corporate. I'm sure we have many committee members in the audience today who are dealing with some really complex legal and ethical challenges within their body corporate and are really in need of some guidance to navigate what really is a very complex legal environment. I do hope that this information provided today will assist you in obtaining some better outcomes for your schemes. Although I'm a researcher, and it's rare that a researcher would be emceeing an event, and I have investigated a lot of these ethical issues and challenges that have been reported in the media, particularly related to conflicts of interest, so I know this area very well. I'm also a committee member. I actually sit on 3 committees, one of a very large, complex and challenging community title scheme in Southport. So for those of you who are really struggling, who are frustrated, I assure you I have great empathy for what you go through. The ethical challenges that are currently being discussed in the wider strata community are real. They're often difficult for communities to effectively deal with. It's difficult to explain to other owners what the concerns are, and it's certainly difficult to get resolution. I do hope that the Queensland Government takes steps to better understand what is actually going on in strata and community title schemes, and that they implement in the future effective reform measures. I'm very heavily involved in what's going on in New South Wales in their reform process. They're certainly the state that is going first to deal with a lot of these issues that are going to be raised today and that have been raised, as I said, in the media. But they certainly are at the forefront of addressing some of the ethical risks to strata communities, and I do hope that Queensland starts to take notice. I really do look forward to today's program. I'm hoping to learn some things as well as a committee member, and I'd like to meet as many people as I can and have a chat about what's going on in your scheme, and hopefully I too can provide some guidance to you. As Nikki said, I am a director of my own research and consultancy company, Strata Knowledge. I was in the university sector for many, many years as a researcher. I've been researching in this area now for 18 years, so I've seen a lot. And I do hold a conference annually, but you're welcome to go onto my site. I have a lot of research that's freely downloadable for anyone that's interested in understanding a little bit more from a researcher's perspective about some of these issues. So you're welcome just to Google Strata Knowledge and you'll find me somewhere. I'm also part of an organisation which is the Multi-Owned Properties Research Hub, and that's a number of academics, both in Australia and overseas, that upload their research work to the hub, and again, it's just freely downloadable to anyone that's interested in understanding from a researcher's perspective what's going on in this area. So, the first presentation today is from the Office of the Commissioner for Body Corporate and Community Management. We have been fortunate in Queensland to have this office for many, many years now. We've been one state that has a bit of a legacy in relation to having this office, which is great. And we're going to hear a presentation from Nathan and Tim from the office. Excuse me, Commissioner for what? Information, Community Education and Conciliation at the Office of the Body Corporate and Community Management. Then we're going to go on and have a presentation from Shari Driver from the Owners Corporation Network. Shari's going to talk to us about what does good strata look like. And then just before morning tea, we're going to have Chris Irons. Many of you know Chris Irons. He's from Strata Solve, and he's going to talk about taking back control, how owners can better control their strata destiny. And then, as I said, we'll have morning tea. If you go outside and get your cup of tea and coffee where it was this morning and something to eat, and come back and have a conversation. Let's have a discussion with others in the room, our sponsors, and of course, our presenters. So I welcome you all to this amazing event, and I look forward to meeting many of you as the day progresses. So can I ask Nathan and Tim to come up? So Tim is a conciliator from the BCCM, and he will introduce the conciliation team, what it does. He will also talk briefly about the statistics for the team, as well as the latest dispute trends and interesting cases. Nathan is the Principal Community Education Officer for the Information and Community Education Unit, and will give an overview of the role of the BCCM office, the body corporate landscape in Queensland, and how the information team can assist body corporate stakeholders. So we welcome, so I'm going to be bad with my slides, I can see it already. So I'll pass it over to Tim and Nathan for their presentation, and I'll keep them on time.
Thanks for having us. So, obviously, our office does have a very long title. We prefer just to go by the BCCM office. It's easier for everybody. Basically, our office is split into two sections. So I kind of handle the information and community education side, and Tim will talk about the disputes side. So those are our contact details on there as well. Simply Google BCCM Queensland to go to our website, and you'll find hopefully all of the information that you need. We also have a callback service any weekday between 8:30 and 3 p.m. You can call us. I'll put our phone number up later. We have a team of 7 people that are always happy to answer any questions you have. They're very good at what they do, and they can provide great general information about body corporate, the legislation, and hopefully help you sort out any issues that you've got. And we also do written inquiries. If you're one of those people that prefers a written inquiry, you can take something back to your committee, show them what we said. More than happy to provide those as well. And like I said, Tim will talk about the disputes side of things. But importantly, we're not an investigative body. We don't come out to body corporates and we don't investigate your problems. We'll answer your questions, but you have to provide us with that information so that we can answer your questions. These are just some facts about body corporates in Queensland. So there's roughly 52,000 schemes and over 500,000 individual units, which is quite a lot. A quarter of those are at the Gold Coast. So I'm assuming most people in here are owners, probably down the Gold Coast. So you take up a lot of that, actually. We get about 1,500 disputes a year, which in the grand scheme of things, when there's 500,000 owners, that's actually not that many. So it's a good sign that body corporates are a good place to live and they're not, having too many disputes. This is very important. So breaking down who is who in a body corporate, and when people buy into body corporates, they don't necessarily know these things. So the body corporate, I like to think of it as the collective noun for the owners. A lot of people will call us and say, my body corporate's not doing this. And we have to tell them, you are the body corporate. You need to do something about it. You get involved and you can help. The committee are those people that are elected for just the general day-to-day decisions, things that not every owner needs to be concerned about. If you want to be involved, please get on your committee. It will make your life easier if you get involved. Then we've got the caretakers, who are your contractors. They come in, they generally have letting rights as well, and they look after the grounds, just make things run smoothly day to day. Your body corporate manager, they help with your paperwork. Is anyone here the secretary on their? Yeah, a few. So you probably deal with your body corporate manager the most out of anybody, sorting out things like minutes from your meetings and sending out all the notices. And so you have a lot to do with them. Importantly, the manager does not take over your job. They might do a lot of your duties, but they do not stop you from doing it. If you want to be involved and you want to do those things, you still can. And then we've got the tenants as well. Is anyone in here a landlord? Having tenants in their property? Yeah, a few. If your tenancy is for 6 months or more, you have to put your tenant's details on your body corporate roll. A lot of landlords don't know that. The tenant's details need to be on that body corporate roll so that they can get sent those notices as well. They are part of that body corporate and they should be informed of things that are happening in the scheme. Can I get a show of hands? Who in here knows what a regulation module is and which one applies to your body corporate? Okay, that's actually a pretty good amount. A lot of people don't, and when you buy into a body corporate, you need to know what it is. So the regulation modules apply to body corporate. They're a piece of legislation, as well as having the Body Corporate Act. There's 5 different regulation modules, or 6 if you count the 2-lot schemes, that also apply. Now, not all of them will apply to every body corporate, so you need to know which one does. If you don't know that, I strongly recommend you find out. That's just a breakdown of how many are in each one. As you can see, the standard module is the most popular, obviously. Down the Gold Coast, the accommodation module takes up a lot of it because there's a lot of holiday buildings. In order to find out which regulation module applies, you need to get a copy of what's called your Community Management Statement, or your CMS for short. And you can get a copy of that from Titles Queensland. If you want a copy, they will charge you. I'm not sure what the fee is. Otherwise, if you ask your body corporate committee or your body corporate manager for a copy, they should be able to provide it. It should be in your body corporate's records and they should be able to provide that for you. And also you should get a copy when you buy the unit. So yeah, like I said, the regulation module that applies to your scheme will be on that community management statement, and it's very important you get a copy. That community management statement also includes your bylaws, which I'm sure everyone knows, or may have lots of questions about later. They cover a range of things like pets and parking and noise and nuisances and all that sort of stuff. So it's very important that you get a copy of that community management statement and also your survey plans, because the survey plans show your lot boundaries, show you what's your property, what's common property. So it's very important that you need to know that as well. Tim. Just that one.
Aha. Thank you, Nathan. You don't have to raise your hand, but I'm assuming some people in this room have been to conciliation. You can do a very little nod. Okay, I saw some nods. Okay, so you've dealt with our service before. Okay, there's 5 of us that are the conciliators in the Office of the Commissioner. We are definitely not so famous. In fact, we're not famous at all. But if you do have a dispute, you would normally come to us first before adjudication. 4 of us are legally trained. 1 has a psychology background. We've all done mediation courses either through the Department of Justice or through Bond University down here on the Gold Coast. And that's who we are. What is conciliation? Well, this gets a bit confusing. Often the parties that come to us go, we look forward to your decision, you're biased, tell me what to do. Okay. None of those things we can do, and we're not biased. What we do, as opposed to a mediator gives you no information. They are blank slate. You go to mediation, they don't provide any input about legislation or anything like that. You go to adjudication, you clearly get an order. You get a person that will read all the information, read the legislation, make an order. We're sort of in between. We give you information about the legislation, adjudicators' decisions, bylaws, your registered plan, but that's it. We definitely don't make a decision. We're not biased. What we're doing is just giving you information. So sometimes people hear things they don't like to hear in conciliation, and they get upset about it and they say, you're biased. No, that's just simply what your bylaws say. That's what the legislation says. So we're advocates for those, I suppose, for the legislation, for what the actual fact situation is. And then we get people saying, please tell me what to do. It's like, we can't. It's your decision. We'll help you generate options, but ultimately it's up to you to make the decision that you can move forward with. Process, pretty simple. We do it by Teams or telephone. We ask you to put aside up to 3 hours, which sounds like a lot of time, but often we actually go over 3 hours once people get into discussion. And what we do is we try and keep it informal. We facilitate a conversation. We explore the issues. We help the parties generate options, and hopefully, fingers crossed, at the end of the time, there's actually a written agreement that is entered into, and the parties walk off holding hands, and we never see you again. Yeah, perfect world. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't always happen. At the moment, if you actually get through our, not if, you will, once you go through our case management process, it's about 4 weeks before a conciliation will be scheduled, and then adjudication after that if the matter's not resolved, about 36 weeks. So that's just at this stage, so it varies depending on, how much demand there is and what's going on in the office. In terms of conciliation, we do about 750 a year, and our resolution rate with either a partial agreement or a full agreement is around 70%. I'm taking that as 3/4. It's not quite, but I'll take that. Okay. So in terms of main topics for dispute, I'm just going to skip ahead here and I'll come back though. Okay. That's my pet. Body corporate said no. Basically because Brisbane City Council wouldn't allow it. But seriously, pets are sort of not a big issue anymore. It's not really a main area for dispute because of the change in legislation. So actually, I'll just leave that there for the moment so you can admire that. That's actually a snow cow, apparently. And I thought it was not alive until it actually went to the toilet and I went, oh, you are alive. You're actually a real living creature. So main topics are maintenance, bylaw breaches, and improvements. Surprise, surprise. So that's what most of our disputes are about. In terms of the main reasons for the dispute, though, that's interesting. So I've been in this game for a while. I've seen some patterns. First really obvious pattern in a dispute is you've got the, and I don't mean this in any derogatory way, the rule stickler versus the she'll be right, mate. And that is a very common cause of a conflict. Somebody wants to see the notices go out on time, the minutes taken correctly, decisions done the way they should be, and then somebody else is like, don't worry, we're getting the job done. Doesn't matter, it's all good. The chair can do that. We'll ratify it later. Dispute. So that's fairly common. The other one, things happened, and it's gone from there. You've been rude. You insulted my wife. You ran over my dog. I don't know, something like that. And that started the dispute. And they can be very, very hard to shift, because once somebody said it's a principle, you know they will often die in a ditch as opposed to reach a resolution. So that's one of our toughest kind of issues to deal with. Then we've got owner-occupiers versus investors. As you can imagine, committee full of investors, owner-occupiers, maybe slightly different views on how the body corporate should be run. Conflict. One of my favourites, I am the chair. I am the authority. It's like, you're not actually, you've only got one vote. But there's often a single person in a body corporate, whether it be a committee member or an owner, who go a bit rogue and do a lot of things unilaterally and cause disputes. And I've had many chairs tell me, but I am the chair. It's like, you are not Darth Vader. You do not have the Force. You are simply one voting member on the committee. So that can sometimes lead to disputes. And the other one's not actually what leads to dispute, but what's quite interesting is schemes we have never seen. So as Nathan mentioned, there's quite a lot of schemes. We don't actually see that many conflicts. But every now and then a scheme pops up that's been around for 25 years. And it's like, oh, where have you been? And when they come to conciliation, it's like, your sinking fund. What? Your meetings. Oh, no, the chair does that. Your bylaws? What are they? You know, so some of those schemes, when they come to us, it's like, oh my goodness, you've been operating in a bubble forever, and we don't have an enforcement arm, so we don't know what you're doing. But when they come to us, we go, how have you escaped all these years running your scheme like that? But there are plenty of them out there. When we get a conciliation, we open it up and look for the history, and often this is the first one, and you go, wow, that's an old scheme. Where have they been? So in terms of, specifically, I've dealt with everything: noisy parrots, wind chimes, temperatures of water, concrete cancer, visitor parking, what defines a visitor, subsidence, structural issues, etc., etc. But the one that kills me, and you'd be surprised, the one that I just go, oh no, it's water. Anything about water terrifies me, because who owns that pipe? Who maintained that pipe? Where is that pipe? Is it the waterproofing membrane? Is it a crack in the wall? Is it a hot water pipe? Etc., etc. Makes them very complicated. I dealt with a scheme once that spent about $40,000 fixing their water issue, and the next rain event, same water issue. They'd clearly gone down the wrong pathway. So water for me is always a very tricky issue. I mean, it's good to work with the parties to try and work it out, but water is really, I think, number one enemy in terms of within a body corporate if it's going to rear its ugly head. So really that's about all I have to say about our process, but as a conciliator, I really enjoy it, and as I said before, every now and then people do walk off into the sunset saying, hey, let's have a beer together, let's have a cup of tea together, let's hang out together, and that's really nice to see. We're not there to mend relationships, we're really there to work on, what the legislation says, are you complying, how do you resolve this? But often, as a sort of side benefit, we do see relationships healed, and we see schemes not come back to us again after going through conciliation. So that definitely warms the cockles of my heart. And Snow Cow is probably long since deceased. I couldn't actually get her out of China, so yeah.
Yeah, so that's our phone number, and our if you want to lodge a written inquiry, it's on the screen there. So feel free to take a photo of that if you want.
Please join me in thanking Tim and Nathan for their presentation. Our next presentation is by Shari Driver, and Shari is the CEO of the Owners Corporation Network of Australia. Shari will speak about the Owners Corporation Network's role in advocacy and what OCN thinks good strata looks like. Please join me in welcoming Shari.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to firstly thank the organisers for today. So great job, great venue. Great to see everybody there. Wonderful that it was a sold-out event, Nikki. Well done for that. So just a little bit about me. I haven't been to Queensland in this capacity, been to Queensland many times, but our organisation is based in New South Wales, but we are the Owners Corporation Network of Australia. So we're actively involved across the country. We know we have Chris Irons as one of our board members, so we're lucky to have someone based here in Queensland. We also have a board member in Victoria, Jeanette Corcoran. So I'm here today with knowledge mostly in my brain about New South Wales. My background, I worked for many years as a town planner in local government for all that joy that I had in local government. So I've got lots of knowledge and lots of acronyms in my head about all those sorts of things to do with that. But as a strata owner, I've been involved with strata. I've lived in strata for a long time, initially as a tenant when I was younger, and then later I actually bought my own strata property. I think the first one was back in 2005. And then as a town planner, I always said I would never buy off the plan. And about 2 years ago, I did. So I have a really good lived experience of all things strata. I am the strata chair of 2 properties. One which is a multi-level with commercial at the bottom, restaurants and things like that, and lifts and all those types of things. So I understand a lot of the strata issues myself through lived experience, whether that's the building itself or the people that are involved. So today, what I wanted to talk to you about is ethics. So it's a pretty broad topic, ethics. I think it's probably something Nicole should be speaking about as an academic background rather than myself, but I'll give it a shot, shall I? So now I'm just going to make sure I've got this clicker working, okay? Yes. So my topic today is what good looks like. And I've just got a nice generic apartment building in the background. I won't tell you where that is exactly. Could be anywhere, right? Looks pretty pleasant, nice sunny day. People there are happy, having a lovely time, but it gets ugly. So what does ugly look like? I'll get to what good looks like later, but for now, what does ugly look like? Well, what I wanted to do was tell you a bit of a fake story to try and describe what that looks like and how that feels. So I'm going to talk about some fictional characters that I'm going to call Bob and Sally. And I want you to imagine that Bob and Sally have escaped the southern winters and headed north for retirement in Unitland, a fictional place. They've never lived in a unit before and have never heard about a strata or an owners corporation or any of the other terminology that the speakers were mentioning already. They buy a unit with a lovely beachfront view. They pull up a chair, get a cold drink, and they're ready to relax. A little while later, they read their emails and they discover a body corporate meeting will be on soon, and they decide to attend as their retirement diary is empty right now. Well, what do they find? They are told by the other unit owners that, number one, there is an owner that's always on the chair role because none of the owners have time to be on the committee. The caretaker, building manager, gives the owners free tickets to the footy every season, and he says they come from a company that looks after the insurance for the building. The repairs to the roof are getting done cheaper, they say, because the caretaker is doing the job himself. Bob and Sally are now aware of the connections, in brackets disclosure. Someone's told them about it, so it's all right, isn't it? They are aware that someone is getting paid to make things happen, and that there's probably a written document somewhere where it's all sorted out. Are they worried? Well, not really, because they trust the people doing the job, and they don't realise, unfortunately, about connections, commissions, and contracts. This is ugly. It's ugly when bad operators like these take advantage of Bob and Sally's ignorance and do not act in the best interests of the owners corporation or body corporate. So I'm going to use some terminology today that's a little bit New South Wales, a little bit country, and a little bit in between. So you in the audience today, I'm sure you understand more than Bob and Sally, am I right? Yeah. But this is where painting a picture of who are we advocating for is really important, because we're not advocating in OCN for the strata managers, the body corporate as a company, or the commercial aspects of that. We're very much advocating for the strata owners. Now, we may well be talking about issues that are matters relevance to the tenants as well, but our core purpose is for the strata owners. So that's a very particular place that we place ourselves in terms of ethics. So I've put some things on the slide there. There's a lot of content in there, but I also want to talk about our role in the picture and what does good look like. Firstly, OCN, we don't advocate personally for people like Bob and Sally. We provide advocacy by spending time researching the issues, being across the challenges for owners, and building key relationships with a range of subject matter experts in strata, including law and building defects and a range of many other topics. OCN applies that knowledge to empower owners, make considered submissions on key matters for strata, and by educating governments and sometimes industry about what good strata looks like. OCN has been very clear, particularly in New South Wales and the government there, but I have been talking to your Queensland government recently as well. We're really keen to see the banning of conflicted payments to strata managing agents. We do support them getting paid for fee for service, but it's the conflicted payments that we're concerned about. We have been asking for the removal of opaque strata insurance arrangements, and so there's I certainly couldn't do the job that ABC had done last year on Strata Trap about exposing some of those issues and those layers, but that we've heard from that program some quite horrendous examples of layers and layers of percentage of profit on top of that. The third thing is about model contracts with consumer protections in mind. So the New South Wales government is already started to move towards removal of unfair contracts, but we need to push a little bit further in relation to that. So where does the word ethics fit in this scenario? Well, it's not ethical for the people in the story with Bob and Sally to be grooming those unit owners with gifts and benefits, even if it is legal, okay? So there's a real distinction between the word ethical or immoral as opposed to illegal. So there's some grey areas. The things that might be legal in New South Wales might not be legal in Queensland. So you really need to look at those types of distinctions. So we've seen ugly. What about bad? Okay, well, Bob and Sally blissfully continue enjoying unit land until their levies start going up. They're not on the committee, so they have to ask around, what happened? Turns out that the building manager has lodged invoices for $1 million in labour for the roof. The building manager is uninsured, unqualified, unable to be found anywhere for the time being. The strata manager turns out also to be a newbie. They haven't been on the job very long. They're lovely, but they haven't been around very long. So the competency of the trusted building manager and the trusted strata manager are questionable. The conduct of the building manager in this case is probably unconscionable. And there's little accountability. Why? Because the owners' corporation signed off on the one quote, they signed off on the value of the contract, and they didn't check the credentials for anyone really. They just thought it looked okay to them. So they made a call to the unit land government, in this case, these gentlemen over here, and they say, I'm sorry, we can't give you any relief as there's nothing we can do. You've signed a contract, right? We can give you some advice and some information, but that's the situation. In other parts of Australia, of unit land, there is no commissioner. So if you're in a unit land where there is no commissioner, who do you ask? Who do you go to? Well, you can't necessarily go to the people that you've trusted. You need to think about where that might be. So, as I said, we don't help Bob and Sally individually personally, but we can certainly point you in the direction of some people to get some advice from. We've got a partner directory, for example, which has got building defect providers, lawyers, things like that. So we can give you some hints on that. So OCN in this situation has been clear to governments across Australia that we are keen to see for owners and others competency levels, education levels and ethics levels to be brought up a bit higher. And that's for owners, managers, caretakers in relation to all of their different respective roles. We're keen to see compliance consequences for bad conduct. So that's a really important role that, depending on the remit of different commissioners from state to state, or fair trading it is in New South Wales, depending on where it sits in the different functional areas of the government, it's really important to make sure that people are held to account. And we need to make sure that the commissioners that are there, or an ombudsman situation, whatever the legal context might be, that they're adequately resourced to do the job. In New South Wales last year, they were given some extra funding for a task force to look at certain issues there. So that's really important to be able to enable that. So where does the word ethics fit in bad? Well, it's not ethical to hire yourself and then explain that you care, but have no responsibility. Well, that really just rests with the owners' corporation, doesn't it? In this case, in the Queensland model, it might be slightly different to the New South Wales one, but in New South Wales, they could potentially divorce themselves from that responsibility. But I like the pyramid diagram there, at the top of that is not the strata manager or the building manager, it's the owners' corporation or body corporate. So enough of ugly and bad. What does good look like? Well, good looks like ethical, honest, fair, professional behaviour, the sorts of things that you would naturally expect to happen. Bob and Sally seem to be mere innocent puppets of the process. So who's to blame? The evil building manager, the evil strata manager, the government, or Bob and Sally themselves? Well, everyone really. Good strata relies on a combination of efforts from all of the parties that are involved. Bob and Sally, well, they've probably just spent their kids' inheritance on their new home and may have spent a lot of time thinking about the colour of the new lounge. But they didn't do a lot of unit research nor educate themselves about being a strata owner or what an owner's corporation means. They involved themselves in a part of the community, but their strata community should be a vital part of their life in unit land. The strata manager, well, they may clearly be in breach of some legal provisions, but others, their actions just might be immoral or unethical in unit land's rules. The rules might be strata management principles. Industry competition needs to actually uphold those principles themselves. It may not just come from government or from a bylaw or something like that. It's really about the industry itself and how they behave. They need to role model those good behaviours because word gets around about how different strata managers behave or building managers behave. And customers have sometimes a choice about being able to move from one provider to another. So the role of government across Australia, as I said, is very different and it varies wildly. Some have a strata commissioner and some don't. I know there's been some discussion in the ACT about wanting to have one down there, and OCN was back before my time. Our organisation's been around for more than 20 years, so we were quite influential in trying to get a strata commissioner in New South Wales. So some of the reform that's been happening in New South Wales is quite progressive. We're hoping to see some other reform like that across Australia for the interests of owners. So one thing's clear, whichever state you are in, the state of strata is fraught with legal and financial obligations. Where sticking your head in the sand, like Bob and Sally, is no defence. They're going to still be subject to the costs and the implications and the angst of some of those issues. Without them being even aware of it at the beginning, they're still going to have the consequences of that. So good strata involves collaboration, competition and community. Again, where does the word ethics fit in this scenario? We're talking about it being good strata. Well, It does involve everyone acting ethically. So every decision or every conversation you've got, you have a decision about how ethically you behave. Now, everyone's moral compass might be slightly different, but there's some general agreed principles about that. I'm sure if we wrote down a list of principles in the room, we would probably have words like honesty, fairness, integrity. We'd probably come up with some pretty similar words in that list. So we all know those words. And learning to look at what good looks like, that's a bit of a tongue twister, and the way that is in the past is different to what we might expect today. There's a turn of phrase that's developed about the pub test. So I think it's a bit like the ethics test. It's about, well, actually it doesn't really stack up when you look at it. It doesn't matter what the regulations say or what the clauses say, well, it just doesn't really feel right. It's not really okay. So OCN has a role in looking at some of those things and saying, hold on a minute, well, the legislation might look like that now, but really it doesn't pass the pub test. Really we need to do something about that, whether that's in Queensland, New South Wales or at the federal level. And we do often partner with consumer groups in other spheres and lodge joint submissions about those things that might be across states or across at a federal level. So if there's ethics the way things have been done in the past, well, that's really not acceptable today and shouldn't really be tolerated. And there's ways to progress that and look at your location where you live, what your community is, and how that's being done and what those behaviours are, whether it's the commercial side of that or within your community. I think that's a really important thing about being a champion for ethics within your community. So lastly, I'd like to say that if you, like Bob and Sally, would like to learn more about Strata and what good looks like, then head to our website, which I'm going to cue on the last slide, hopefully. Yes, there we go. So ocn.org.au, so you can go to the website, there's an enormous amount of resources there, there's lots of information. So you can join and become a member, and I'd love for you to become a member, but you can actually subscribe to our newsletters as well. And you can get a taste of what OCN advocacy looks like. You can do that without subscribing and without becoming a member. There's a tab there that just talks about OCN advocacy and policy and OCN in the media and at least all of the submissions that we've made on a number of the topics that I've glossed across very quickly today in the presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much, Shari, for that great presentation. And so our next presentation before morning tea is from Chris Irons. And so there's been a lot of negativity and uncertainty about Strata. So let's try something more positive and constructive with Chris Irons. Chris was Queensland's Commissioner for Body Corporate and Community Management for over 5 years and is now Director and Founder of Strata Solve. He will show us how owners can take back control and their options for exercising their rights and getting what they want. Please welcome Chris.
Thanks, Nicole. You'll have to be a bit gentle with me this morning because I'm experiencing a bit of trauma. So I stayed here last night at the Mantra next door, and when I was checking in, to my absolute horror, I realised Collingwood was staying here as well. I can't even begin to tell you how challenging that has been for me. So you're going to have to forgive me if I appear a bit unsteady on my feet. When I got invited to speak and the topic came up, I thought a little bit about what I might say. There's been a lot of negativity about Strata over the past 6 to 12 months, and rightly so in a lot of cases. I'm not here to gloss over that, far from it. Instead, though, I thought to myself, I'm going to take the opportunity to try and offer a more constructive way of looking at things, something slightly more positive, if I may. I speak to a lot of clients, a lot of prospective clients. Uniformly, what happens is that those clients feel like they don't have options, or they feel like the situation is kind of hopeless. A lot of my job is to try and convince people that it's not hopeless and there is something you can do. The mantra I always say to clients is that every strata issue has a solution, and a constructive solution at that. It might not seem like it at the time, and it might not seem like it to you when you are dealing with it, but I can assure you that there is. So my presentation today is focused on that. First up, a few things that I think is really important to keep in mind. As I've just said, you're not powerless. There are options for you. This is a mindset issue. Forget about legislation for a second. This is a mindset issue. You need to embark upon a journey to solving a strata issue with the right mindset. It doesn't mean that you have to be delusional about the outcomes, far from it. You do need to be a bit constructive. Next. You do have options. There are a lot of options, surprisingly enough. I'm going to go through some of them in just a second. This one, you can't wait for the government to fix things. The government may fix things. There are some positive signs out there. But what do we know about governments? We don't know what their priorities are necessarily. We know that those priorities change and can change very quickly. We don't know what timeframes. We don't know what outcomes. We don't know if it's in this term of government. We don't have any commitments on the table about strata. So you can't wait for the government to change things. By all means, you should be advocating to your MP. You should be writing to the minister with things that you want reformed. Absolutely. But you can't wait for that to happen. Organisations like OCN will be doing that. But you can't wait for that to happen. And then very closely related to that, you can't rely upon somebody else to do something for you in strata. Is it fair, for example, that you as an owner have to spend your time, resources and effort to assert your interests and your rights, while the body corporate can use body corporate funds to do so? Is that fair? No, it's not. That's the system that we have though. You can't rely upon somebody else to do it for you. Unless you take the initiative, nothing will change in strata. So, I'm going to present to you those options that you already have at your disposal. All of these things exist in legislation now. You don't need any legislative changes to achieve these things. This is not an exhaustive list either, but this is a selection of options that you have as owners at your disposal. First up, a relatively simple one, opting in to receive information. This is as simple as opting in to receive information about committee meetings, minutes of committee meetings, or even notices that a committee meeting is going to happen. That can be an opt-in process. I know a lot of people don't want to receive that information. They think it's pointless, irrelevant, extraneous. I understand that totally. But if you want to know what's going on, you need to be in it to win it, so to speak. So that's one thing. Next up, it's the right to submit motions. So as owners, you have a right to submit motions. You have a right to submit a motion to a general meeting, and that's a relatively unfettered right. So you can submit as many of those as you wish. As of relatively recently, you also have the right to submit a motion to a committee meeting. There are some restrictions on your ability to do that at the committee level, but nonetheless, the fact remains the right to submit motions exists, and it's one of the key options that an owner has to get things done. The gentleman down here before was talking about submitting motions. That is the way in which things are done, and I think if you would talk to Tim and Nathan, they would tell you that to see a motion submitted is a key form of self-resolution in the dispute resolution process. It's a really important option and a really important right that you have as owners. And then very closely related to that, the third one, the right to a decision. So if you submit a motion to a general meeting, you have a right to a decision on that, and a minuted decision at that. At a committee level, you have a right to a decision, and not only that, you have a right to a decision within a certain time frame. That time frame is 6 weeks. There can be an additional 6 weeks in some cases. It doesn't mean the committee must take 6 weeks. They can do it quicker than that. But you have a right to a decision. And that right to a decision is really important because in the absence of a decision, that's where that feeling of hopelessness or a lack of option sinks in. But once a decision is made, it's the decision on which is your basis to dispute, your basis to challenge, your basis to take things forward. Your fourth option, and one of my favourites, lobbying. So anybody who's ever seen me speak or heard me speak would know that I'm a big believer that strata and politics largely identical. If you don't have the numbers, you don't get what you want. I'm afraid it is that simple in a lot of cases. Lobbying begins with finding out how your fellow owners feel about a particular issue. So you might feel very strongly about something in your strata scheme. That's great. You need to know whether or not you are just one or whether other people feel the same way. If you have a belief in something, but the 100 other owners either don't care or they feel the opposite, then you might have to accept that you're going to lose the numbers on that one and you're going to lose the day. However, if you go and you start engaging with your fellow owners and then you find pockets of interest. Oh yes, I thought that too. I was interested in that thing as well. I was thinking along those lines too. Let's talk more about it. You start to find that groundswell of support. There's safety in numbers in strata. The way in which that process kicks off is that you need to get a copy of the owner's roll. It always begins with that. And then very closely related to that is number 5. So you've got lobbying, then it's about the message, the communication that goes with that. What message are you trying to send? What outcome are you trying to seek? Messaging is all important in politics when you have the Prime Minister or whomever on the news at night. They spend all day with their team of spin doctors and media advisors coming up with the message. And the message is that 10-second sound grab that they are hoping that people will remember. Stop the boats. Alert, not alarmed. Zelensky is a dictator. On and on it goes. Strata is slightly different. You wouldn't necessarily want a 10-second grab in strata, but neither do you want a 10-page dissertation when you're trying to attract interest or trying to persuade people. You want simple, concise, clear, succinct messaging about what it is that you are trying to achieve and how you are trying to achieve it. That's the nature of campaigns and communications. I do and have done a lot of that work with clients to achieve outcomes that they want. It's convincing somebody to vote a particular way. It's convincing them to not vote a particular way in some cases. Or it's about an election-style campaign to get someone on a committee or indeed someone off a committee. Number 6, and this relates to a couple of the points I raised just a tad earlier, is the right to challenge. So you've gone through the process, you've submitted a motion, be it at committee level or general meeting level. You've either got a no response or a response that you think is unreasonable or no response at all, or the process has been flawed. So the notice period is irregular. The voting, the counting of the votes was irregular. The chairing of the meeting was irregular. The information that was sent out in relation to your motion was misleading. These might all be a basis on which to challenge those outcomes. And the path to challenge is through the Commissioner's Office. It's the only path to challenge in Queensland. And then finally, number 7, and this one is one that I probably hear about most often from clients, removing or changing the composition of a committee. Whenever I hear about a client who's got a problem and a problem with the committee, this is always the first thing that they go to. We need to get rid of the committee, or we need to get rid of the chairperson, or we need to get rid of the secretary, or we need to get rid of the treasurer, whatever the case may be. I understand why people always want that, and it makes a lot of sense. And there are some cases where changing the composition of a committee is absolutely what is required in a given situation. But the grass isn't always greener when it comes to changing the composition of a committee. You need to be sure that whoever you are trying to remove or whatever composition you are trying to change is actually going to be better than what you've got. You need somebody to replace. There's no point seeking to get rid of the chairperson if you don't have somebody better to take their place. The removal of a committee member is actually very simple. It's by an ordinary resolution at a general meeting. You don't need to explain why, you don't need to go into a lot of detail. You just ask that they get replaced, removed and replaced. That one, as I say, in a way, it's kind of your go nuclear option when you talk about the options that owners have. There are a lot of steps that you'd want to go through before getting to that point. As I say, that is not an exhaustive list of the options, but nonetheless, they are options that every single owner has at their disposal right now to get something done at their strata scheme that they want done. So with all that in mind, here are some best practice tips for you. First up, I've said at the start, and I'm going to say it again, there's always a constructive solution. This process, and it is a process to resolve a strata issue, it begins with a mindset, and that mindset must be a constructive one. You must believe that there's an outcome to be achieved. Second, you have to take the initiative. Yes, it's tough. Yes, it's tedious. You need to take the initiative, though. Somebody has to do it. And it might as well be you. Number 3, you need to be methodical. There is a temptation when you're looking at solving a strata dispute to cut corners, to run right immediately to the solution. Strata is not like that. A really good example of that is bylaw enforcement. The bylaw enforcement process is prescriptive, it's convoluted, it's lengthy. There are good reasons for that. But if any part of the prescribed bylaw process is not carried out, the whole process fails. You do not pass go and you do not collect $200. I've seen many instances where that's the case. So when it comes to strata and solving strata issues, you must be prepared to go step by tedious, convoluted step, because that's how it is. Step 4, a big one. You must be patient and you must be resilient. So patience goes with the previous option about time and being methodical. Resilience is another thing though. Resilience incorporates a resilience of time, how much time you're prepared to put in. Resilience is also financial resilience, how much money you are prepared to spend on the issue. But resilience, I think probably most important of all, is an emotional issue. How much emotional will have you got to see the issue through? You might think that the strata issue that you're facing is really important, critical even, well and good. Do you have the resilience to see that through? There is no point starting unless you're prepared to see it right to the end. Otherwise, it's a pointless process. And number 5, and probably most critical of all, is that you seek qualified, meaningful advice. What do I mean by that? If you've got a water ingress issue, you'll speak to an engineer. If you want a legal opinion, you speak to a lawyer. There are some very good lawyers in the room that you can do that with. If you've got some issues around finances, you'd want to speak to an auditor or an accountant. If you want some assistance with mediation and dispute resolution, you talk to somebody like me. What you don't do is you don't seek out advice from people who are not qualified to give it to you. There's plenty of people out there, particularly on social media, who are prepared to give you input about strata issues that they know nothing about. An organisation like LookUpStrata is not one of those because they go to people who are expert in the field to source the replies. But if you are relying upon a Facebook group with anonymous posters and anonymous responses for your strata input, you're doing yourself a big disservice. And you are not taking back control. You are not relying upon the options that you have at your disposal. That's me. That's Strata Solve's mascot, Ernest. Ernest is sadly not with us any longer, but I can assure you his spirit lives on. Thank you.
Thank Chris so much for his presentation. Now we're at that time now for a cup of coffee or tea and something to eat, which is great. So I hope that's given everyone a great opportunity to have a chat to others. There was lots of conversation around the room, which was really great to see. So we'll move on to our final three presentations this afternoon. So we've got two fabulous speakers, and then we'll have a panel session. So we get to ask some questions and give everyone an opportunity to delve into these issues in a little bit more detail, which I'm really looking forward to. So our next presenter is Will Marquand from Tower Body Corporate. He is the General Manager of Tower Body Corporate, and he joined the team in 2020. And he's going to talk about body corporate management contracts, which can be very difficult to read and compare. I'm actually doing a project at the moment comparing these body corporate management contracts across different jurisdictions, and it is a minefield. So I do feel for everyone that has to deal with these. Owners signing a new contract often find that they cannot really see how the contract is being applied until a few months after signing, or sometimes later than that, I think. And by that stage, it's often too late. This session examines how body corporate contracts, management contracts work, and what owners should look out for before signing a new contract. So please welcome Will to the podium.
Thanks, Nicole. Good morning, everybody. Sorry to be the person to interrupt your tea break. This is always kind of the death session at conferences, trying to get in after everyone's had a cup of coffee and something to eat. So my name's Will Marquand. I'm the General Manager of Tower Body Corporate. I'm also a working body corporate manager, so I have customers who I deal with every day. Some of my customers are in the audience here. Thank you for coming along. Some of them may even be happy customers. I'm not sure. You'd have to ask them after the fact if that's the case. Those customers may be sending me emails now at this very moment when I return back to the office. As all body corporate managers, I will have a large amount of work to do. It is a very busy and difficult job at times. As well as being a day-to-day manager, I am also the general manager of Tower Body Corporate, which means that I work on establishing the company policies, and in particular, I work on establishing the contract and signing up new businesses and things like this. So I'm going to talk to you today about how contracts work, and hopefully give you a few ideas and tips of things that you can ask your body corporate manager to help you avoid some pitfalls, perhaps, if you are looking at signing a new contract at any time. Reputationally, I think we have to acknowledge that body corporate managers are kind of at a low point at the moment, right? It's been a pretty bad last 12 months. If you look at all the stories that have come out from the ABC, they have shone a light on the industry that does not reflect it in a very positive way. I would like to say that those stories were a reflection of just a few bad apples, but unfortunately I don't really think it's the case. I think there's kind of widespread issues across the industry that are unresolved. In Queensland, those problems are exacerbated by the fact that you do not need a license to be a body corporate manager. Anyone can set up, anyone in the audience here today, you could set up your own body corporate company this afternoon if you felt like it, and you could start managing people, you could start managing people's monies, buildings and lives as soon as you can get someone to sign a contract up for you. I think that's a very poor situation, and it really opens up the market to cowboys, basically anyone who's prepared to be unscrupulous. Happy days in Queensland at the moment because no one's really out there stopping you. There's no policing of the industry, and it is a very tough scenario for owners like yourselves to be facing that, because it's very difficult to work out if the person that you're speaking to is trying to do a good job or is merely just telling you that they're trying to do a good job. It's very hard. How do you make that distinction? Lots of people are good salesmen, but not everyone is a good practitioner. The good news, I think, for you as owners is that you probably have more control over body corporate managers than you realize. Our contracts are 1 and 3 years is the mandated amounts in Queensland. And those contracts, those periods of time frames are very short. A 12-month contract is nothing. If you're really unhappy with your body corporate manager, you can look at, and you've got 12 months or 3 years, you can look at changing that very quickly. So the emphasis is on owners, I think, to try to support companies that are acting ethically and professionally. And the more that owners gravitate towards those companies, then the more the industry as a whole will act ethically and professionally as a result. So take the opportunity when you have it to examine your contract, and if you need to, then possibly look at changing your body corporate company if you're unhappy with the services that you are being delivered. Okay, I've got some slides. I've got a simple message for you here, which is that good body corporate managers aren't cheap, but bad ones are very expensive. What I mean by this is that when people talk about body corporate managers, they often talk about, they look at the costs in their contract and things like this, but they very rarely consider the benefits that a good body corporate manager can bring to them. In the best case scenarios, a good body corporate manager will help your scheme run smoothly and efficiently. They will help you choose the right contractors, they will help you make investments in the right areas, and they'll help guide you so that your scheme can work in the most efficient ways. I'm thinking about a scheme that I took over earlier last year, where I've worked with the owners, and by making sort of sensible, regular decisions, I helped those owners cut $100,000 out of their budget just by sort of saying, do you need to spend money here? Could you do it more effectively here? And by helping them control any kind of disputes within the complex. A good body corporate manager brings a lot of value. On the other hand, a bad manager does the opposite, right? They don't know how to control owners. They cannot lead committees. They do not control expenses, and they lead you to costs. They lead you to having higher costs. So when you're looking at a manager's contract, you really need to consider what you're paying for, and I would suggest seeking out the best managers because they are worth paying for. They will save your scheme money over time, even if you will pay more for them in terms of the direct fees. Understand your contract. Most people don't really understand how the body corporate manager's contract works. They have their own ideas, but they haven't read it, and they haven't processed the reality of what the contract is and how it is supposed to operate. So if you want to do something about your body corporate manager, the first part of doing that is by reading their contract and knowing what it is that they provide you and what it is that they don't provide you as well. Most body corporate contracts are actually relatively simple. They're split into kind of two parts. One part is a set of fixed fees for agreed services. These generally tend to be things like arranging your AGM, perhaps including a committee meeting or two, providing your financial services, those kind of standard items that we know that we're going to provide to body corporate customers every day, every week, every year. That tends to be what's included within the agreed services. Outside of the agreed services, the contracts can be very wide and variable, but what you need to know is that you will be paying for everything outside of those agreed services. So if you're asking your manager to perform services for you that are not part of your agreed services, you are likely to pay a fee for that. As it happens, I think this basic structure of the contract is quite good. It allows us as body corporate managers to provide you as owners with fairly flexible services. We manage schemes that can range from 2 lots to 700 lots or even more in different cases. How do you create a contract that services all of those different types of buildings and different types of owners? Well, the standard body corporate contract does allow for that. So I think it's quite a strong standard basis for having a relationship with the customers, but it's also one that can become quite complicated at times. People often ask, how do you know how much you're going to pay for your body corporate manager? And I think one of the key questions that you need to ask is, what is the total of the fixed fees you might pay under your contract? When we look at fees, managers often like to discuss simple fees, that is the fee they might charge you for agreed services and disbursements. And what managers like to do is make sure that those fees look relatively low, and then they will put a lot of extra fees on the back end. If you want to understand how much your manager is really going to charge you, ask this question: what is the total of the fixed fees? The fixed fees themselves are the fees that you will pay for not just management fees, management and disbursements, but they include a whole range of other costs. Tax filings, BAS filings, software management, archives, storage. The list can be very, very extensive. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but you as owners need to know that you're getting some value out of those fees. One of the fees I don't think is particularly good, for example, is archive storage. How many of you as owners out there have a little line item on your budget that says archive storage and it comes back at $200 a year, $300 a year? What are you getting back for that? Do you know what your archives are? Well, I can tell you what they are. They're an old box sitting in a warehouse somewhere filled with invoices from 2006 or something like that. If you're paying for that kind of stuff, you're probably wasting your money. So you need to be aware that these kind of fees are built into your contract and that they are part of your total fixed fees. When you sign a contract, the manager is definitely going to charge you for them, and that's why what you need to ask your manager is for that sum of what is the total of fixed fees. Beyond the fixed fees, contracts have professional service fees. And these can really be for any service that you ask the manager to perform that is outside of their standard fixed fees. It is a very wide range of services that managers provide, and owners make a very wide range of demands on managers. It can be very difficult to predict how much your professional service fees are going to be, but as a basic rule, you might think that we charge you for the amount of time it takes to manage your scheme outside of the agreed services. What people don't realize is how much time it actually takes to manage your scheme. A 5-minute phone call for you could result in 30 minutes of work for us. Committee members, if you like to call us for 30 minutes, well, okay, but then we're probably going to charge you, accordingly for that 30-minute chat. You might need to think about whether you're using the manager's time reasonably. If you're finding that your professional service fees are high, it is probably because it is taking a lot of time to manage your scheme, is the simple answer. The other area of costs is probably the most controversial one, which is insurance management. I think probably most of this audience will be fairly familiar with managers charging for insurance commissions. That system is under pressure. I know there's a number of people in this room who are quite strongly against the commission system, but nonetheless it remains the standard amongst body corporates that the commission system is in place. What I think needs to be acknowledged is that the commission is a payment from the body corporate to the manager. Managers say that this isn't the case. They say, no, it's a payment that we get from the insurance company. It doesn't really involve the body corporates. That's just not true, right? It is an additional payment that you as owners are making to the body corporate manager. I don't have any problem or any issue with owners paying body corporate managers for insurance management. You want that service and body corporates provide it. But as things stand, the commission tends to be a hidden payment. And if you really want to know how much you're paying your body corporate manager, you need to add into that calculation that the manager is receiving the insurance commission, or if they do their insurance management a different way, then whatever the costs of that insurance management actually are. So if you want to look at the total costs of management, you need to do a sum, essentially. And that sum is to add a total of the fixed fees, add a total of the variable fees, and add a total of the insurance commission or the insurance management fees. And that is how you get to the point where you can really understand how much you're actually paying your body corporate manager for the services they provide. I encourage people to add up that total, divide it by the number of lots you have, so you can get an individual lot basis. It could be sort of $400 a lot per annum or something like that. And then that's how you need to decide if you feel like you're getting value from your manager for providing for the services that they provide. There's a few other issues that you need to look out for as owners. A good question to ask is about other revenue that the management agency may receive. Does your management agency have affiliated companies? For example, do they have a construction company that's also affiliated with them that they might funnel your maintenance business to, as opposed to using another company that might be cheaper? I don't personally know if there's anything wrong with having affiliated companies, but I do know that when they are in place, customers tend to get worse outcomes. The more affiliated companies a management agency has, the worse outcomes you're going to get as a customer. It's a pretty straightforward way of thinking about it. So check out, just ask your, as managers, we're obliged to tell you if we have any kind of associated parties that we work with directly. Ask your manager, see what they say. If they're coming back with saying nothing or only one or two things, maybe that's okay. If they come back with a list of 10 companies they're all associated with, well, make your choice, but I'd say it's a major red flag, personally. Another question to ask your manager is, how long is the contract? I don't know how many people call me up every year and they say, oh, we want to change management companies. And I say, well, when does your current contract run to? And they have no idea. And then they say, oh, well, we had the meeting in, November, and then they find out that they signed a 3-year contract in November, and they're now unhappy in January. As owners, you don't have to accept it if a management agency is putting a longer contract in front of you. If they're saying, here, sign this 3-year contract, you're not really sure, just say, no, thanks, we'd rather have a 1-year contract. The committee can do that. The committee has the power to do that. If you're really happy with your managing agency, signing a 3-year contract could be a good thing, right? You could get some cost benefits, and you know that you're forming a longer-term partnership with your manager and the managing agency, hopefully to achieve shared goals. So a longer contract's not bad, but know the length of the contract and ask the length of the contract. Be sure what you're signing. You'd be surprised how many people are just signing contracts with no idea the length, the duration, the costs, anything like this. The last issue I think is quite important for owners to consider is if you're talking to a managing agency, you should be asking them how easy it is to communicate with your manager. Can you pick up the phone and speak to them, or do you have to go through 3 different layers of bureaucracy? Do you have to speak to 3 different departments before you can actually speak to the person who makes a decision? I'm sure many of you have had that situation. It's probably pretty frustrating. If you look at most body corporate businesses, there's probably 2 people in them who are really active in decision making. That's the body corporate manager and the financial controller. They're the people who really make the decisions and who really decide how your issue gets actioned. If you're having to speak constantly to layers of assistants, layers of different departments, insurance departments, maintenance managed departments, the reality is most of the time you're probably not speaking to the person who's actually making the decision or who's actually activating the resolution for your scheme. So it's very important that you ask, how easy is it to speak to the decision maker? Usually that's the manager. If you can pick up your phone and call your manager, good. If you can email your manager directly, good. If your manager mails back to you, good. If you have to pick up the phone, you have to wait 15 minutes while the secretary connects you to the manager, that's not so good, right? You're not getting any help that you need. So if you're signing a contract, ask that question. Okay, my last point for today is simply value your manager. It's a hard job. As someone who's worked across multiple businesses, most of the body corporate managers I have worked with have tried hard for their customers. You may not feel that, you may not appreciate it, but personally, what I enjoy about my job is actually being able to help people and provide them with some constructive assistance to create a better scheme. I can appreciate that that's not always readily apparent to people at the other end of the phone, especially when you have to give hard or difficult information. But your manager is a resource that is there to help you, and if you value your manager, managers will value you back. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Will. So our next speaker is Tyrone Shandiman from Strata Insurance Solutions. So in 2024, Strata consumers took a stand against unethical practices in the strata management industry, demanding greater transparency and accountability. The Australian Consumers Insurance Lobby was at the forefront of this movement, reporting 146 instances of alleged misconduct. Today, Tyrone will share his insights on the industry's future, emerging ethical concerns, and what strata owners need to know to protect their their interests. So this is about the Strata Insurance Shake-Up, and welcome, Tyrone.
Thank you very much for having me today. Nikki, what a great event you've got as well, thank you. And it's my pleasure to be here today. I thought I'd start with a joke. Why did the strata manager cross the road? To escape questions about insurance commissions, because I'm sure they got many this year. But look, I wanted to talk today about ethics, and I want to talk about ethics today, and why it's important that industry address ethics, and what can happen in cases when they don't do that. 2024, that was the year that consumers took their power back. Can I get a clap for consumers around Australia? Strata management, yes. Consumers are no longer silent bystanders. Regulators are paying a lot of attention to the issue of strata management and commissions. And strata managers likewise are also focusing on that. So it's been a very good year. It's been a very good year for consumers. I thought that I would give a little bit of a timeline of our organisation, the Australian Consumers Insurance Lobby, and what we did for consumers in insurance this year. I'm not going to read these slides word for word, but effectively, as this conversation started, there was groups that had, I guess there were very differing views on what people wanted within this industry with relation to commissions. The Owners Corporation Network and the Unit Owners Association of Queensland, their position has always been that commissions should be banned and abolished. We know the Strata Community Association want to keep them. Our organisation tried to meet somewhere in the middle. So we said if commissions are going to stay, what can strata managers do to ensure that we get good outcomes for consumers? Now, we asked the Strata Community Association in their best practices that they incorporate these 7 things. Sadly, the majority of strata managers in Australia are already doing this. They're already doing it. I know Tower Body Corporate, this would be business as usual for them and for the majority of strata managers around Australia. So we had a series of meetings with the Strata Community Association, about 3 to 4, and Ian, if I can get you as well. We had about 3 to 4 meetings with the Strata Community Association to talk about some of the issues. They were really good in terms of wanting to meet with us, but there were some issues with regard to I guess that we found that they were polite but dismissive. There was no real genuine engagement, and we found a lot of what they were doing was window dressing. And I've got someone in the audience with me today. Pam, if you can pop your hand up and stand up. Pam is a former committee member of our association. Pam, can I just ask, does this slide summarise kind of what we expected or what we saw? And can you just share a little bit of your views on this as well? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yes, it definitely reflects what we discussed when I was on the board with you, Tyrone. And I have to acknowledge there was a lot of people on the committee that did a lot of work, and I know there's people around this room that consulted to us as well. So it definitely does reflect. Tyrone, one of the things I wanted to talk about, and I thank you for this opportunity to comment and to add what you have already articulated on this matter based on my recollection of our meetings with ICA, which we attended. And I will be very honest here. I found the meetings with ICA frustrating, disheartening, and in quite an eye-opening experience. That's as a consumer. Excuse me for my language, but I'm from North Queensland, so if you're having trouble understanding me, that's why. But in North Queensland, there's been a lot of issues in the Queensland regional areas with insurance. So I went onto this board to support, to have a say, to feel that we could have some impact for consumers, real impacts, real outcomes. We didn't, well, we did, but it was frustrating, disheartening, eye-opening, and it failed to address the root causes of consumer harm. ICA's proposed self-regulation lacked effective enforcement. It also failed to impose meaningful financial and reputational consequences, and that was the part that greatly frustrated me, to deter unethical industry practices. As a consumer, I felt like they were focused on maintaining their status quo rather than implementing reforms that would protect vulnerable consumers. It was evident that their priorities were misaligned and with the urgent need for change and consumer protection. I really urge consumers in this room, owners and industry experts, that you actively become involved and support organisations like ASIL, because they are making a change, and I think there will be some media around this as well. So thank you for the opportunity, Tyrone.
Thank you, Pam. And also, Pam, thank you for your advocacy. So Pam attended every single meeting, and you said ICA, it's actually SCA. That's okay. Attended every meeting with the SCA. She attended every meeting with ASIC and ACCC, every consumer forum, and I just want to say thank you for your advocacy for this issue. You really contributed last year to the consumer cause, so thank you. So I think really thank you. If I can really summarise, we got out of 3 to 4 meetings and it just felt like we got nowhere. But we had options. Now, I don't think that the Strata Community Association fully understood our capabilities as an organisation because we were very new. But as someone that's worked in this industry for 13 years and witnessed a lot of very appalling behaviours, I had a very big war chest of issues that I could share with regulators. But I think the number one thing that was the most powerful thing for us was that we had a MailChimp list of strata managers, a database of over 700 strata managers across Australia. So we were able to communicate directly to those strata managers. And in December of 2023, we drew the line after getting nowhere and said it's now time for Plan B, and we said we would be calling for a ban on commissions. So moved our position from saying let's keep commissions and be reasonable to the industry can't self-regulate, so it's time to call for a ban on commissions. In January, when everyone got back from the break, we also then notified the industry that we'd referred 146 examples of misconduct to the ACCC and ASIC, and we outlined a case why there could be a $240 million claim against the strata management industry in relation to the practices that they had undertaken. So that caused a lot of stir in the industry, and it caused what was needed to start to get the momentum for change. Now, ABC, I definitely don't want to claim any credit for this. We were part of a group of consumer groups that spoke with the ABC. I spoke to Linton Besser quite a few times and gave him a number of contacts and examples. But I think I remember Chris Duggan, who was the then president of the SCA, talking at a forum when John Trowbridge released a report on commissions and talking about how the real estate industry had just been on 4 corners and that would be the worst thing that could happen to the SCA. And I guess then that happened. And I guess it did help that we had a number of other media outlets picking up stories as well. And also we decided that we would release our own report on activity within the industry as well. So I think that it's safe to say that we had a lot of options and we exercised them. I just wanted to take a moment to recognise good actors in this industry. If you're a strata consumer and you've got a strata manager, there is a very good chance that your strata manager is one of these, okay? Bad actors in this industry are the minority. And I would like to also recognise that the good actors in this industry have been the collateral damage in this discussion. But I wanted to acknowledge that in lobbying, we didn't as a group use the opportunity to highlight the good actors. We simply dealt with the bad actors out there. But today, I do want to say that there is a majority of strata managers out there that are good actors. Please don't approach your strata manager with an automatic assumption that they are a bad actor, because that would probably be incorrect to do that. So the outcomes for the industry, I think it's fair to say that the industry had the opportunity to deal with the issue of ethics early and put in place a range of policies, but they didn't. The outcome was catastrophic. The reputational damage to this industry has been catastrophic. We've had board members resign before their terms on the SCA. There's a lot more regulatory focus. I know for a fact that governments are looking at legislative reform, but I think really what we're starting to see is strata managers really focus on more ethical practices, which is excellent. It's been a real win for consumers, so I think that there is greater awareness of this issue. I know for a fact, I have a business, Strata Insurance Solutions. We're certainly getting a lot more questions, and it's great to see. Consumers are more educated and more informed. We're seeing a lot more transparency around the issues of premiums and commissions from strata managers. But I'm also starting to see just an improvement in practices. Some of the bad people that I would have considered bad actors a year ago, with excessive remuneration models, we're starting to see those remuneration models come back down to more reasonable levels. So for consumers, it's been quite a win. But I just want to say there's more to come. Change doesn't happen quickly, particularly when you're dealing with industry and legislative change as well, but there is more to come. And with that, what can we expect? I suspect we're going to start to see some legislative change around some of these conflicts of interest. I know in New South Wales, the government has signalled an intention to ban commissions to strata managers. Probably at the end of last year, I probably said it would be a 90% chance that the government would ban commissions based on some of the statements that the Fair Trading Minister was saying. Today, I'd probably say it's more like 50 to 60% chance in my view. So we've still got the fight to get the legislative reform through. The industry, we know that the Strata Community Association is now starting to reform and take the appropriate actions that are needed. And there's also a lot of behind the scenes work going on with regulators as well. With regulators, they don't talk about the action that they're doing. It's often very silent, but I've been involved in some investigations and they've been very good. And I also, we haven't heard or seen anything in the class action space, but I suspect that there might be some activity in this space in the coming year would be my best guess if I could put a bet on that as well. I just wanted to also there are people within this industry who have been very squeaky wheels, and I just wanted to talk about the personal cost of advocacy. I think when I started doing this, I obviously have Strata Insurance Solutions, my business, and I was at the time wondering if this was going to backfire on me spectacularly. I know that when I spoke to Karen Stiles, the then Executive Director of the Owners Corporation Network, she said, be very careful, because they will come for you, is what she said. I think that there have been some small digs around, using the consumer group that I work with for the benefit of my business, but I've had to issue public statements to say, well, if we remove commissions, that's my competitive edge as someone that doesn't pay commissions to strata managers. I've had people scrutinising certain business practices, and I've even had strata managers telling some of my staff at events to F off, all right? So it's been very interesting. Thankfully, because of the reporting of issues to ASIC and ACCC, there are whistleblower protections. But I wanted to say a year on, I guess I was questioning it. Probably about midway through the year, I was getting very uneasy about it all. And Pam, I think you and I had a few discussions, but I'm pleased to say that a year on, it has been absolutely worth it. It's been absolutely worth it. We've gotten a lot more focus on this industry, and actually some of the good acting strata managers have started to come to me in my business as well, and certain additional clients as well. So it's been worth it, but the main reason it's been worth it for the consumers. That's the reason why we went into this, and that's the outcomes that we got. So I just wanted to share with you an exercise that you might want to do after this session to look at transparency around commissions and remuneration within your body corporate. If you can get invoices for your insurance year on year, going as far back as you can, so for the last 10 years, what I would suggest you do is get those invoices, okay? Have a look at the name on the letterhead of that invoice and have a look if it changed at any time over those last 10 years. Now, if you had a change of broker or a change of provider, I want you to go and look at the minutes around that time and see if the committee approved the change at the time. Because what we do know is that in some instances, there have been strata managers who have made changes to providers without getting the authority of the body corporate. Also scrutinise the commissions and fees as well to determine was it in your interest. If you see any unsavoury activity in that regard, then please feel free to reach out to me and have a chat. I'd be interested to hear that as well, okay? I lastly just wanted to touch on today market conditions. So the reason for that is I just want people to know in the room that we're starting to see premiums. I guess we've had many years of increases. I'd say it's been about 50 to 70% over the last 3 to 5 years of increases. I'm pleased to say that we're starting to see the market turning and premiums flattening, okay? We are seeing there is more competition, and about 10 to 20% of our clients are getting reductions in their premiums this year. Now, it's not a reduction from the strata insurer reducing their premium on the renewal, but it's a reduction based on competition. Okay, it's a reduction based on competition where a new player or a different insurer has come in more competitive. So what I would say to those in the room is this year is a great year to ensure that your broker is really going to the market and checking the market and getting quotes from insurers this year, because what you might find is that there are more competitive options out there and available. So look, thank you for having me today, Nikki. It's been a pleasure. My hope for the strata management industry, I know that we've probably been that it's been a very hostile relationship with the strata management industry. I do hope that there is reform in the industry. I hope that the industry needs a strong organisation as well, a strong professional organisation. My hope is that they can make the necessary changes that brings about a desire for more strata managers to become members and for it to have a strong industry association and industry focused on ethics and transparency. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now we have our panel. So if I can bring our speakers back. So we're going to have about 20 minutes of panel, and then we're going to have time to ask questions in relation to the questions that I'm going to ask. Lot owners to make informed decisions and advocate for their rights within the strata system.
That's an easy question. Look, I think education as a definition is pretty broad. So we don't need to have a PhD in strata, although it might help.
I do.
Yes, so it obviously that's one end of the spectrum and you can do that. But what we've been advocating for as OCN is to, particularly with the New South Wales Government, where compulsory training is coming into play for body corporates, what we've said to them is that not everybody needs a particular high-level mandatory training. There might be other people that are interested in knowing what's going on, the Bob and Sally, but they might not want to be on the committee. So we've been advocating for more of a sliding scale of education. So we want everyone to be more informed and have information And so we have a lot of information on our website, and lots of other providers like yourself have information, Chris and others around me. That's great, but in terms of the mandating, I understand Queensland has got some good training resources that are available, but I think given the financial responsibilities that you take on, not just for your own home, but when you're on a committee, you're taking on that responsibility, not just for the other people that are on the committee, but that overall responsibility. It's a pretty hefty responsibility that you have. So you're not required to be educated in any way or form. You don't have to have a qualification in town planning like myself to do that. It helps, but I think that's probably getting more informed. I think information is power, and getting the right information is really powerful. So getting resources is important, but get educated about it, at least in a preliminary way. So what we've said to the New South Wales Government through our submissions on this is that we do want mandatory training. There's been a bit of pushback. Some people have said, hey, I've been on a committee for 20 years, I know all about it. But it really needs to be a mandated thing at a minimum level, and then at the lower levels at least provide some information. When you buy a property, you get more information about a renter than you do for strata.
Shari, do you think there's a fear, just sort of thinking about the New South Wales reforms and sort of mandating this, that there might be a lot of owners that then to sort of resist going onto a committee because, you know, it's a big thing. It's, you know, so many people have said, you know, it's really arduous being a committee member. That's just one more thing that they have to sort of do, and there might be real pushback, and we're going to have some problems with getting people on committees.
Oh, look, I think initially that's a natural reaction to change, right? So people might say, oh, well, I don't need that. What's all that about? And some people might have some reaction about not wanting to be pushed in a certain way, and sometimes that's your personality that comes to bear about that. But what we've also said from a consumer point of view, we don't want the education or the training sort of thing to be hijacked by commercial interests. We don't want hefty fees to have to be paid. We want a very low bar of entry. We want to make it as easy as possible for people to complete and do that, and just have the minimum that they need. It's really targeting the office bearers, the treasury, the secretary, the chair, because they've got the higher level of responsibilities. But you know what? It's going to pay dividends, literally, if all the things we've been talking about today. By doing that, I'd say, well, what's in it for me to do this training? Well, you could save your strata levies, your strata premium, your house, where you live, you know, your home. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to pass it over to Will. Will, how can the industry strike a balance between compensating strata managers fairly for their work and ensuring that fees remain reasonable and transparent for lot owners?
That's a tough question. I mean, well, you know, what's fair, what's reasonable, that's always open to debate, I suppose. From the manager's perspective, I think that we talk a lot about wanting to professionalise the industry and wanting to be professionals, but the reality is that too many of us don't act like professionals. If we are going to be professionals, we have to put the interests of the customers first, and then try to make profits second. And then what you see in reality is that a lot of companies build out policies that put profits first, whether they policies in place, whether they're beneficial to the customers or not. From the customer's side, you know, we were just talking about education. You have to be educated about what your strata manager does and what they can actually achieve for you. When you talk about the fees or the work that the body corporate manager does and the fees that they charge, additional service fees, I'd probably reckon 50% at least are just basically a waste of time. They're about sorting out arguments between committee members, people who've had all the information provided to them all of the time, multiple times in many cases, who just keep coming back to you for the same information. So as a group of owners, you can control those fees that the managers are charging by respecting your manager, listening to what they say and making reasonable demands of them, rather than expecting them to be a person who can fix all of your problems with a magic wand.
And I think coming back to this lady's point over here about getting access to records, the ability to easily get access to records so that you can educate yourself about what's gone on to your scheme, I think is absolutely critical and essential, and I think you should continue to advocate for that in any schemes. Okay, over to Chris. Chris, What mechanisms can be implemented to ensure lot owners have access to affordable and effective dispute resolution processes when conflicts arise with strata managers and other stakeholders?
I guess we're fortunate in Queensland that we already have a forum for dispute resolution, strata dispute resolution. We've heard several times that other states and territories don't have the benefit of a dedicated Commissioner's office. Whatever you want to think about the Commissioner's office, and we saw the time frame that Nathan and Tim presented this morning about 36 weeks from adjudication, I can't imagine anybody thinks that that's great or an acceptable time frame. Nonetheless, I think that still remains better than just taking your chances in the courts, for example. But that system could be a lot better. It needs to be better resourced. I think that's a no-brainer. But what we also might want to see are just some tweaks at the edges that might make the process more accessible for owners. I'm thinking here about simple things, and lawyers in the room, you might want to block your ears when I say these things. Page limits on submissions and applications, costs orders for not just vexatious applicants, but vexatious respondents and vexatious submissions for that matter as well. The Commissioner currently has no powers, for example, to declare a person vexatious. That needs to change as far as I'm concerned. I have a mental list of about 20 who I'd put on that list straight away if it were me. I know a lot of people, when they hear that kind of discussion, get alarmed and think that their access to justice would be restricted. I understand that. There is a process, and a very rigorous process, to have somebody declared vexatious, so it's not just a tick and flick exercise.
Yep, thank you very much. And to Tyrone. I think you've covered a little bit of this, Tyrone, but you might want to just sort of speak a little bit more. How can the industry ensure transparency in remuneration models for strata managers, addressing concerns about hidden fees and commissions?
Yeah, look, I think first and foremost, one thing I do want to start by saying is our organisation has never lobbied for lower remuneration for strata managers. We've only ever sought to advocate for transparency. I think it really does come down to the industry making the changes that they need to make in order for that to happen. You can't have one strata manager operating under a very transparent model and having a high fee on that one line on the AGM notice, competing in an industry with strata managers who operate under different models. I think the best way for this transparency argument to progress is for the industry to take leadership. Recognise that right now there's a lot of consumers around Australia that want to see transparency, and I think that they need to take action to ensure and to restructure the way that the industry is remunerated. Thank you.
Thanks. I just have one more question for Chris. So Chris, are legislative reforms necessary to address the power imbalance between strata managers and bodies corporate, ensuring fairer outcomes for consumers? And I know you sort of touched on this in your presentation, but what are your thoughts?
There was once upon a time when I would have said no, definitely not. And one of the reasons I would say that is because one of my other jobs in life was actually drafting legislation. So I spent several years actually being instructing on the drafting of legislation. And let me just tell you, it's an extraordinarily time-consuming, tedious, lengthy, challenging process. Changing legislation is hard work. Not just that, but every legislative amendment that's made, particularly when it comes to strata legislation, creates its own set of problems. The more changes and the more definition that you make in legislation, the harder it actually becomes to apply it. Let me give you a perfect example. Pets. That's all resolved now, isn't it? No, it's not. I can tell you from experience, I've had 2 clients in the last 3 months who have been grappling with the new pet laws. I thought that they were crystal clear. I thought it was all black and white. Turns out it's not. So if something like that cannot be made self-evident and black and white, even after a raft of legislative changes, then when we grapple with conflicted remuneration, commissions, strata manager remuneration, we need to be very, very careful about how we approach a legislative solution. Having said all of that, I now think there needs to be a few no-brainer things included in legislation. Regulation of managers for one, mandatory training for committees another. I'd go a step further, mandatory training for owners. And one of my big things, and I might get shot down for this, I think it's time for long-term occupiers to be given a slot on committees.
Get a few little claps there, Chris. Yeah, I think it's really interesting given, the raft of reforms that we're seeing out of New South Wales. They're going through a huge reform process at the moment. And I think it's, I think there's the weight of legislation, right? Because we all have to comply with the legislation. So the more reforms we see, the more changes that we see to the legislation, the more things we have to comply with. It makes everything really complex in an already very, very complex legal environment. But I think that's probably our future. That's what I've seen over the last 20 years of so of doing this. We're seeing more and more legislation, and I think there'll be more and more requirements to comply with all these different types of reforms. But, well, I do think that is everything. I think we have to wrap up, unfortunately. Nikki, this has been great. But please thank the panellists for their time today. So I'm just going to wrap up. I just think this has been a fabulous event. I think the questions have been really good. I think it's very clear, people are dealing with lots of things, but they're really open to getting more information and learning. And as I said, improving their bodies corporate. I just think we could have gone all day, really, Nikki, and had a forum with other speakers and had these conversations. I think it's been great. It's been great for me as a researcher to hear what is going on in other people's schemes as well. I think oftentimes you feel so isolated in your own body corporate and you feel like this is only happening to me. And I think coming here and listening to the voices of others, I think you start to really recognise that there are some commonality in the types of things that people are dealing with across this state and across this country. So I think it's been a fabulous event. I've been happy to be involved in it. As I said, my company's Strata Knowledge. You're welcome to go on there. I've got research there if you want to download. I've got little briefs, so it makes it easier to read the research. You can subscribe and get some updates from me about anything that I'm doing and of course, my conference. I'm going to pass it over to Nikki to make some closing remarks, but thank you for your time today.
Thank you, everybody. Where do we start? It's been such a wonderful day. I really thank everyone that helped with the organisation of it. Obviously, it was quite a big job to pull it all together, but it's been very worthwhile. I appreciate the fact that you've taken the time out. I'm really humbled by the fact that people purchased tickets and came along and sat in the audience and were interested enough to learn with us today. I thank our speakers, and obviously, if anyone here is familiar with LookUpStrata and the regular webinars that we do and other information that we put out, you just see these faces quite a bit, and we have libraries of information up on our YouTube channel particularly. You can sit and watch hours and hours of education from these wonderful people. So, and I'm sure many of you have, and I thank you for being audiences and supporters in that forum as well. And our supporters that are here today, that have come along and spoken to you, hopefully you've had some really great conversations with them. As always, we thank them for their support, and this all goes together to allow us to put on events like this. I've been asked if we will do another one. I think if you asked me last week, I probably would have said no. But as all things, it's been a wonderful day, so I'd say we probably will be definitely looking at it again next year, and maybe in a bigger capacity as well. So hopefully you'll support us then. And just a great big thank you. Thank you very much to Dr. Nicole, obviously, as well. She's done a fabulous job today, and we were really grateful that she accepted our request to come along and join us for the day. And yeah, thank you again to all of you.